Electrification of Powersports. Welcome back to the AIMExpo education stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome today's moderator, MIC board member and senior marketing manager at Polaris, Joey Lindahl.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. We're super excited to see you here. Welcome to AIM. I'm very excited to be here as the newest MIC board member. Very pumped to be talking about electrification with these guys today, and I want to introduce you to the panel. So first, digitally joining us, we have Bill Jenkins, Senior VP of Sales and Operations at Kawasaki. We've also got Mr. Dan Quick here. He's the Communications Director at Zero Motorcycles. And we've got Marc McAllister, the President and CEO of Tucker Powersports. So welcome, guys. Very excited to have you here. So we're going to have a conversation this afternoon. We want it to be interactive. So over the course of this, we're going to pop up some questions on the screen, some polls for you guys. So please feel free to engage with that. We want to know what you guys think and what life looks like for you as it relates to electrification in your stores, okay? But before we get too far down the road, I want to start off to just level set the group. I know everybody's experience with electrification is a little bit different. So let's start with just some kind of key definitions. You know, you've heard ICE or ICE, you've heard about last mile and pedal assist. I'm sure there's others. So I'm going to pick on you first, Dan, and we'll go around. Can you just give, you know, the top couple definitions you think are important that we should be thinking about? And when we're hearing them, we can understand a little bit about what we're talking about here.
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you. From a infrastructure standpoint, I think that's one thing to really focus on that applies to virtually all options, whether it is last mile or micro mobility. You know, those teeny little commutes, whether it's, you know, from a parking garage, a ride share, a public transportation spot, or all the way up to, you know, what we sell, which is full-size street legal motorcycles. You got to charge it. And so everyone's familiar with how you plug in your cell phone. You know, I'm happy to say that all of our motorcycles can charge from the same outlets. But then from a more industrial standpoint, there's level 2 charging. So that's off of 220, 240 volts. So basically what your dryer operates off of. And here domestically, the universal charging hardware is a J1772 plug, and that's what you're going to see at, you know, your restaurants, your Walmarts, your movie theaters. That's generally level 2 charging. It's what you can install in your house pretty easily. And then on top of that, there's what's known as level 3 charging. That's DC fast charging. It's far more expensive. It's cost prohibitive to install into your home, simply because that's not what our infrastructure, our electrical grid is built off of. So pulling that kind of power to a residential area, it's cost prohibitive. From another standpoint, I mean, going into that micro mobility and last mile stuff, I think you probably have a little bit more expertise in that area.
Sure. I think I'm on. Okay, there you go. Yeah, hopefully most of you have seen the e-Power collection at the Tucker booth. We have a full selection from skateboards to stand-up scooters to e-bikes and to motorcycles. And you know, Polaris is here as well, and there's a fantastic side-by-side that's also an e-powered unit that they sell. So the entire power sports industry is filled with e-power selection. The one thing I would say about fast charge, though, the DC fast charge that was just mentioned, is most manufacturers will advise you to limit the number of times you're using a DC fast charge, because it does have a buildup and a damaging effect on the battery. So the level 2 charging is really needs to be your focus as a user, because otherwise you deteriorate the life of the vehicle.
I think that's an excellent point, if I can hop in there as well. The public EV charging network here in the States, it's in the neighborhood of 60 to 70,000 public charge points. And the vast majority of those, over 90% of them, are all level 2. You're going to see more level 3 in, let's call it what it is, not super fun places to ride, like big trucking corridors. Like, I can tell you, you're going to find a lot of level 3 charge stations on like I-5 up and down, you know, the Center Valley of California. great riding. Thank you. Someone has been there. So as far as like practical applications and what you're going to encounter far more frequently as a motorcycle enthusiast or a power sports enthusiast as well, you're going to have far more engagements with level 2 charging.
Bill, anything that you'd like to add in terms of just key definitions or keywords and terms that we should be keeping an eye on and listening out for?
I would just add HEV may come up, hybrid. Right now we're talking pure electric, but hybrids could be part of our future. Alternative fuel sources, hydrogen has been mentioned by our global president, Mr. Hiroshi Ito at AICMA. So those are two other key ones, and then certainly ICE, internal combustion engine, I think, which everybody's familiar with, is what the three that come to my mind are.
Awesome. All right, so I want to dive into the conversation. We're going to do kind of two things at the same time. So the first question we have for you all is we want to know how many of you are currently carrying any e-powered vehicles in your stores right now. So as you guys are answering that question, I've got a question for the panel here. And Marc, let's start with you. I want to hear from your perspective what you see as kind of the state of the state in electrification.
Well, we're seeing it here live. It's fantastic. We've got more dealers carrying e-power products in their dealerships than not. So that's a really positive sign for where we're going. I would probably say that the corollary to this question is, where do we see the longevity of internal combustion? And I think that's a really, when you consider how many vehicles there are in the marketplace and how passionate we all are about powered vehicles, ICE-powered vehicles, I don't see this as being an either-or conversation. This is very much an and conversation. This is us as an industry looking at how do we reach out and incorporate this power source into our industry and into our customers and add it right alongside with the products that you already know and love.
Yep, I think that's spot on. I think this is really encouraging. For those of you that are answering no, would also love to know if you see that in the roadmap for you down the road. Do you think you will at some point? Dan, do you want to jump in next though and give your thoughts on where we're at right now with electrification and power sports?
Well, I think that's great that it's not a either or, but a yes and. I think that's very much reflected in the bulk of our dealership network. We have our dealer advisory council here, so you can find them and speak to them yourselves, but we only have a handful globally of single line dealerships. So many of our most successful dealers are building thriving electric motorcycle sales lines off of their existing incumbent ICE business. The one thing I would add is that so we've been doing this, just a little bit of background, we've been doing this for about 15, 16 years. And on one hand, that's really cool to say like you're the longest running all electric motorcycle manufacturer. And on the other hand, it's like saying you're the tallest kindergartner, because it's still, for a lot of folks and a lot of your customers, still a really nascent technology. It's still really new. There are a lot of questions, a lot of times more questions than answers. But what we found in that process, in that timeline, is there was a question initially of, if electrification was going to be happening. And then that evolved to not if, but when. And now I think it's pretty safe to say, and you're seeing it reflected in front of you on the numbers, that when is now. Like, it's definitely happening. And from a technology standpoint, there have been some thresholds that a lot of owners or prospective owners have had in their mind's eye, that were kind of big benchmarks for viability of the space. It needs to go 100 miles an hour. You got to get down to an hour charging. These real, bellwether benchmarks. And those are thresholds. I'm happy to say that, Zero and even other manufacturers have all passed, years ago. So it's happening now and it's accelerating. It's really exciting.
Go ahead, Marc.
And before Bill adds his thoughts, and I think what's really exciting that we're seeing at Tucker is, there was a point in time, and we talked about this earlier in the week, there was a point in time where it was a coastal effect or a metropolitan effect, and that's certainly no longer the case. The e-power dealers across the United States are in general everywhere. And that's, you know, a great sign of the adoption of e-power as being part of our ecosystem when it comes to power sports.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out to add there. I want to bring up another point kind of along those lines. Bill, I'll ask you to weigh in just on kind of state of the state, and then we can circle back on the second part of the question, which is, what are you seeing in terms of customer perception of electrification? And do we think it's different across the country? Does California feel different about it than Kansas, for example? So Bill, I'll let you jump in first there.
So we're going to just dip our toe in for the first time, as was announced at AIMExpo by our president, Mr. Ito, with 3 models globally this year. So we are an infant in this. We're going to crawl, and hopefully with the industry, stand up and walk and then run. I think there's 2 sides to, I think it is an addition. I think we're, you know, ways away from it being an only, could get there with, you know, pressure on emissions and so on, and carbon neutral, all that good stuff. We already have many of our government agencies and rental agencies are asking, when are we coming with electrification? So I don't know if that answers the question. I think it's definitely, we're here. That's why we're sitting on this panel today. I think it's great for the industry. It should expand our business. And I'm really happy to be part of this today to discuss it.
Dan, what do you think about customer perception across the country?
I think it's a great question. And I think, you know, Bill's on point with a couple of those items there. Like, so far as adoption went, you know, we follow the automotive space by a few model years behind in a lot of ways. But the cool thing about that is it was very much isolated to coastal areas, primarily because originally one of the largest leading indicators to electrification and adoption was infrastructure. And that, you know, that's just where those charge points were put in earliest. The cool thing about being in power sports is we don't have to have that same headwind. We get to follow directly in the tracks of automotive because they, you know, they're a huge, I call it like, you know, old Detroit or old Europe, you know, throwing around their money. They are investing massive amounts of dollars, and so are local and city, state, federal governments, you know, putting in tons of money to implement those charging strategies so that, you know, we can use the same chargers that are already there. As a result, you know, you talk about the differences of electrification. I'd be hard pressed if there's anybody here who, wherever you're from, if you haven't seen a Tesla driving around. Like, it's here. They're obviously charging it. It's not on the same charge, you know, and he's just doing small trips. He or she's just doing small trips. And, you know, we can build off of the existing charge network that was established for originally the automotive. And as far as, you know, interest that Bill mentioned, as far as like agencies and whatnot go, like, that's awesome. Anybody who operates a fleet at scale understands that, you know, the most minute service and warranty issues, you know, that gets crazy blown out of proportion and extrapolated when you have multiple vehicles. So from a cost standpoint, agencies absolutely love electric motorcycles and electric vehicles of all descriptions. I mean, we have over 120 agencies here in the States, you know, scores more globally from a security standpoint, who love for pursuit and patrol electric motorcycles.
So you mentioned automotive. Mark, I want to pass this question to you about customer perception, but I want to add to it a little bit. How do you think we're comparing to automotive? I know we're trailing a little bit behind just in terms of time-wise, but how else do you see there being a difference between the 2 industries?
Well, just so building off of the closing statements, I think, you know, we have not established the credibility of electric vehicles to the same level that the automotive industry has, because we are a couple of years behind, and I think that's coming. I think when you look at the utilitarian uses of side-by-sides and motorcycles, we're starting to get there, and there's starting to be interest. When you look at the utilitarian final mile delivery of a stand-up scooter being your solution for getting from a bus stop to work or whatever version of that, that's getting there. I think the bicycle guys are actually a little bit further ahead because the e-bike space is more mature and much, much greater adoption. But as their performance gets better and better, it starts to become a very high quality dirt bike. And so that gray area between a very high quality dirt bike and a very high quality e-bike, is pretty slim at this point. So I think the adoption is starting to get there. I also, you know, the piece that concerns us at Tucker is not just the vehicle sales. It's the ownership experience beyond the point of purchase. And you started to get at it. Fleet owners love e-Power because maintenance costs are significantly lower. You don't have oil changes. You don't have engines to work on. You really are talking about tires and brake pads and maybe fluids depending on how the bike is built or the side-by-side is built. So there's some real benefits to the customer, particularly a high mileage customer. There's also some work that needs to be done in every dealership across the country to make sure they understand there are some real risks in maintaining e-Power units. The batteries are not made for messing with. You need to make sure that you're training your staff, your technical staff and your parts counters, that there are certain parts that you just need to know how to touch. It's not just like tearing the head off of an old ICE unit. You actually need to know what you're doing. And so there's training investment, there's infrastructure investment, there's storage requirements around batteries. So you know, the plug I would make, if you don't know exactly what you need to know, please educate yourself around how the life cycle of an e-powered unit needs to be managed. We've invested with Ricardo to create content on Tucker University to help you understand the requirements of how to get into the e-Power business, not only from a sales, but from a service and aftermarket standpoint as well, because there are risks that every dealer needs to understand.
So you bring up a good topic. Go ahead, Bill.
I would add to the adoption challenges compared to the auto industry. First, the simple one is that, you know, most people need an automobile to get around. So it's kind of a necessity for a lot of the folks who use an automobile. The second piece for the industry, our industry, is to get that wow factor and, you know, the thrill of the air in your face. I see it today in electric bicycles all over Southern California. It's been crazy since COVID. And you see it from kids to grandma to grandpa to, you know, to dads, brothers, sisters. So I think there's going to be some crossover to that, hopefully, that we can take advantage of. But I think the wow factor, if you've never, I like high performance cars, and if you've never hopped in a Tesla and drove one, it's a pretty cool experience. So I think that's something that we need to engage in the so to speak sale of electric, is the differences between ICE and electric and some of the cool features. And, you know, and there may be some drawbacks too, depending upon the consumer. They may want something that makes a lot of noise. So so I think that's where the lag's going to be between our industry and automotive, is that in adoption.
So where do you see there being the biggest customer concerns about going electric? When they're considering what to buy next, where do you see the customers having the most questions or concerns? Bill, you can start.
Okay, well, I think there's the education of the product, the differences. Price may be, you know, a difference there in the beginning until we get some economies of scale. Batteries come down. The resistance, is, as mentioned earlier, is the range, battery life, charging stations. Those are the, you know, the top level, low-hanging fruit challenges, I think.
Dan, what do you think about that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know what you want to call them, like the 4 horsemen or whatnot, but there are some pretty basic questions that enthusiast riders have about electric. And, you know, it's pretty much what he was getting at is, you know, how far does it go? How much does it cost? Because they are premium products. And, you know, how long does it take to charge? And like I said, you know, there are those pretty significant benchmarks that we've passed that alleviate a lot of concerns. But, you know, just to talk about exact specific situations, you know, we've got a bike over at the Zero booth right now that was ridden on the Colorado BDR route. You know, for all of you guys who are familiar with the BDRs, especially the Colorado one, shout out to the Rockies. They're friggin' gorgeous. It's, you know, 1,000 miles of the most stunning, barren, and demanding terrain some of that you can find. And, you know, we had a guy, he did it on 2 zeros. Not like he had to alternate riding them, but he and his buddy, you know, took 2 zeros, took 2 DSRs, and they went and did it. And it's the exact same ride that they've done, you know, dozens of times before on gas bikes. It just took a different element of planning. You know, certainly you don't go out, you know, all half-brained on that type of journey on any machine without doing a little preparation. And they just did different preparation. You know, anecdotally, we got, you know, tens of thousands of customers all over the world putting millions of miles on, and some of those include, you know, a couple went from the top of Scotland all the way to the bottom of South Africa. So, you know, you can do whatever riding you want to do. It just takes an element of planning that you're not familiar with. So it kind of seems a little abstract. It kind of seems a little challenging, but, you know, once you know what you need to know, sky's the limit.
Marc, I'd love your thoughts on those challenges that pop up and the questions that customers have, but then also if you think there's been enough to overcome those where like are incentives still needed and important? Like, do we need to really dangle carrots?
Okay, well, my thoughts on learning how to plan a ride and so forth. For those of us who are old enough to remember Nokia phones, pre-smartphone worlds, when the first versions of these came out, they turned us into the weirdest humans around because we ran around looking for a power outlet about every 6 hours because the batteries wouldn't last. I know you're too young to remember that. But we all learned to figure out how to charge our phones because they were so useful and so much fun to use, whether you were playing Candy Crush or actually using it for work, that it was more fun to use this kind of phone than the old Nokia phones, and you were willing to put up with that seeking out the power. And I think when you ride an e-power motorcycle or two-wheeler of any kind, or even the four-wheel Polaris, they are a lot of fun. The acceleration is thrilling. It's like two-stroke acceleration on steroids. They're crazy fast, and it's fun. And you know, most of us got into power sports because it was adrenaline that kept us in the sport because it was so much fun to be around. And e-power delivers that in spades. And so what I would suggest is that once you get hooked, you're going to figure out how to find that power outlet because you're going to want to charge your vehicle. And I think that's probably where your customer who rode across Colorado is from. Are we in a position that we still need incentives? I think unfortunately humans, we're not great at making good choices on our own sometimes. I'm having dry January right now, which was a terrible choice when you come to Las Vegas, but I still need the incentive of having a trip in February that I can look forward to having a nice glass of wine. We need some kind of encouragement to get in. And so I think adoption needs to be encouraged, whether it be at a state level, a local level, at a national level, I'm not sure, but there needs to be some kind of infrastructure to keep us going and to keep us on the straight and narrow. So I think so.
Just to be clear, I have very fond memories of my clamshell phone. Just to be clear. Bill, what do you think about incentives?
I try to stay away from them as much as I can, but they are, you know, incentives are driven, you know, there's two types of incentives. There's an engagement incentive just to get people familiar with the product, and there's a competitive incentive. I think most of us in the industry right now and all of our dealers know that product is far shorter than demand. So incentives right now are very, very little out there. Will we need them in the future? Probably. Hopefully not on introductory electrical vehicles. That they'll take off and they'll be in supply where our dealers can make money and we can make money. But I'm not a big fan of incentives, but they are a necessary evil at times.
Folks in the audience, I'd be curious to know, we've got another poll we want to ask here. Are you all getting inquiries and questions about electrification as the future of power sports in your stores? Are people asking you about it? If we can pop up that poll, would love to just kind of see what folks are hearing from customers every day.
And actually,
let me add one other item to the incentive piece. We've always looked at incentives one way is that product is king. So if the product is right, right time, right place, right product, right quantity, incentives usually are not important to sell it. So, but product is king.
Well, I would love to thank you for setting up exactly the point I'm making, Bill. No, I mean, just to be a bit contrarian, I'd say incentives are not required. And you know, certainly we've been able to sell motorcycles long enough that we've seen many changes in what the incentives available are. And you know, the reality is we don't need them. We certainly don't rely on them. You cannot rely on them because they come from the government, and that's super consistent, right? They're nice to have, but if you have a focus on a transformational experience, whether it's on 2 wheels or 4 wheels or whatever it is, people, you know, to echo exactly what Mark was saying, people are going to want it. Like, if it's a great experience, people will want it, and they do. And you know, that's fundamental to everything that is going to be instrumental to our success as a company, but then also electrification's speed of adoption, because it's going to happen. It's just whether or not it happens quickly, is getting butts on seats, like riding it. You know, I occupy a really cool spot with my company where I get to put a lot of people on electric motorcycles for the first time. And I tell you, it is a trip. Like the worst I have ever heard is, that's not for me, but that is the future. Like, if you like riding motorcycles, the feeling of effortless power instantly, it's one you've just got to experience. Like, we can talk until we're blue in the face about it, but you know, I recommend go throw a leg over it. Go feel it.
So dealers are getting lots of questions about it, as we just saw in the poll results. I want to talk about who's buying them today. So Mark, why don't you start? Let's hear from you. Like, who are the folks that are the early adopters and the folks that are buying EV today?
Well, it's at least with the collection that we have, it seems to be a very broad collection of people. I mean, I wouldn't say, I think a lot of us would automatically jump to a younger audience, and that's not necessarily accurate. I think we also see, particularly in the e-bike space, there's a lot of adoption from riders who are in a situation where maybe one person is a cyclist and the other isn't, and the e-bike is the best way to level the playing field so people can ride together. And we're seeing a lot of family participation in that regard, as well as maybe more experienced riders who are looking to keep up. And so e-Power is a great leveler in that regard too, because it helps you keep up with all your friends and mates and so forth. The level of approachability of an e-Power product also means we're able to bring in a broader audience. It's literally twist and go, or on the e-bikes, it's pedal and go. There's not a lot of technology. You don't have to learn how to shift. Licensing isn't a barrier for at least the products that we're selling. So you have a much broader selection of people that are able to participate in a powered 2-wheel experience and get the thrill. And the way I look at it is that is better for all of us. Personally, I love having a big 2-cylinder motorcycle, and the more people we can get into 2-wheel experiences, whatever they are, the more 2-wheel vehicles there's going to be out there for friends and family to ride with in the future. And so I'm a proponent of this being part of keeping Powersports alive.
So you bring up families and the growth of e-bikes. Bill, I'm going to kick this question over to you, and then I want to hear an answer from you guys as well. But so in addition to the folks who are already riding in the industry, who are adopting the stuff and buying them, are we truly growing the powersports industry here? Are we bringing in new people we wouldn't have reached otherwise?
Absolutely. I think what we didn't mention yet is that one of the challenges in the early part of my career at Kawasaki, working in the New York Motorcycle Show for some 14 years, one of the biggest questions we would get in the booth is, do you have a motorcycle that doesn't require me to use a clutch and shift? And unfortunately, our answer was always, no, we do not have that. We can take you to school, train you how to use it, use the clutch, shift it, so on. But that is one of the easiest pathways to that you see right now with the electric bicycle phenomenon jump is how easy it is. And when you see, and I must tell you, in Southern California here, they have pedals on them, but I have yet to see people pedaling them. So they are loving the fact that they are replicating the feel of a motorcycle with a throttle. And so I think that in itself breaks down a huge barrier for a conversion or an entry level inexperienced person with something that's motorized and two wheels. The fact that you don't have to shift it.
I think you're exactly right. I can say from my own experience, I probably would have gotten my motorcycle endorsement 10 years earlier if I hadn't been intimidated by shifting. It took me a long time to get up the courage to learn how to do that. And so it feels like that opens up a lot of doors for folks. But Dan, do you want to weigh in on this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. To take a step back and get into the, who the owners are, we can, obviously there are exceptions, but we can generally look at our riders in 3 categories. And the first one, you're sitting next to him and her right now. It's definitely an enthusiast. This person, he or she has been riding their whole lives, probably owned a ton of bikes, probably owns multiple bikes currently. And they're looking to put an electric into their fleet. 9 times out of 10, we find that Zero ends up kind of migrating towards the front of the garage sooner rather than later, and it kind of becomes their go-to. But either way, this person they're here. That's definitely the enthusiast who is the first to come in to our space. After that, it's kind of like a returning rider. Maybe this person, they grew up riding dirt bikes or whatever, self-selected out of riding for a while, whether, they had a baby or they went down or whatever the life event was, they stopped riding for a period. Now maybe they're a little bit older, making a little bit more money. The idea of some whiz-bang 2-wheeled Tesla is super attractive to them. And, that's somebody who gravitates towards Zero as well. And then the third category, I think, you are really on the money with describing that. It's kind of a catch-all, but whether you wanted to call this, the prospect or the early adopter or whatever, this person is not power sports adjacent. This person is not being targeted by motorcycle industry ads. They maybe did have a good experience with a pedal assist bike, or maybe they did have a good experience with one of those sit down bird or scooters, whatever. And the idea of a clutchless experience, going 40, 50 miles an hour through a city, maybe at one point was a bit daunting to them, but they saw that they were capable of it and they're ready to do something new. So that person, it's a wild card from a demographic standpoint. We never really know what they look like. What was the other element of that question?
I think you touched on both. It
Okay.
was who's buying today and are we really growing the sport here?
Oh yeah, and I definitely want to bring that up as well, because the cool thing is, I think as an industry we've seen this movie before. I wasn't at a dealership at the time. I was at a bicycle dealership, but from what I understand, 20, 30 years ago, there was kind of a bit of a resistance from a dealership network about bringing in ATVs, bringing in, watercraft, bringing in those other types of non-motorcycle power sports products. And, now we know ATV, UTV, it's over half or about half of the power sports industry. We've seen this movie before. Those are people who were not in the market for a motorcycle, but ended up going to a power sports dealership because they had something that they wanted. That's exactly what's happening right now with, the entire category of electrified products.
Okay, so dealers, another question for you. We want to know if you're comfortable with the potential of selling and servicing and accessorizing e-powered products alongside your internal combustion engine vehicles. What's your comfort level there? We just want to hear your thoughts on that. Seeing some good responses, and while folks are responding there, I love seeing that the comfort level is high. That's good. I want to get some thoughts from you guys about what dealers should be considering, knowing that it is a mix of maybe some power sports riders today, but we are bringing some new folks in. what do dealerships need to be considering when they're incorporating EV? So what does their sales approach need to change? What do they need to be thinking about when they're incorporating EV into their stores? And Mark, I'll start with you.
Well, obviously during the selling experience, I think it's not new news to anybody because it's what we've always preached, but it is getting bums on seats. You've got to sell the experience of how the ride is, whether it's 2 or 4 wheels. That's critical in the selling experience. I think also part of the selling experience is helping to explain to the consumer what the ownership experience is going to look like. Paint the picture for what it's going to look like. People are used to, I've kept this in my garage, I put a battery tender on it. In springtime, I'm going to have this done to it. I'm going to maybe do an oil change. I'm going to maybe put a tire on it, etc. They can mentally justify what that ownership experience is going to look like. I think we're going to have to tell them, explain to them, yes, you have to tend the battery. The battery does have a life. There is going to be a point in time down the road because a lot of motorcyclists, particularly motorcyclists, keep their vehicles for quite a long time. Right? It's not unusual for some of us to have a motorcycle that's older than them. I do. So, you know, we have to help people understand that that will mean batteries need to be changed. You need to understand how that works and how you're going to do that. I think we need to help people overcome their mental barriers on how they would own a vehicle for as long as they think they need to own it. And then lastly, you know, as you get to those service and service point intervals, because they are going to need tires and they are going to need brake pads, make sure that we're keeping them fresh and engaged and in the store, because, you know, they aren't going to have as many touch points, but you've got to make sure that those touch points are memorable and, you know, let's face it, lucrative for you, so that you ensure that that customer stays engaged with you and keeps coming back to the store. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely. Bill, what do you think? How does the sales approach need to change or not when you're selling EV?
Yeah, I think there's going to be an educational factor there for sure. You know, we're going to work on developing ours for Kawasaki and our family of dealerships. But I think definitely it's going to be different. Many, as Mark just stated, there's many different categories to consider or thoughts to consider, whether it's, you know, you don't have to put stable in your fuel anymore and so on and so forth. But yes, there is definitely education going to be needed in this, and it's basically a new vertical. I think it's going to sit alongside the ICE motorcycle or other power sports verticals. I think this will sit next to it for quite some time. I don't think it'll overwhelm it in the beginning, but it could, you know, down the road.
Dan?
Well, as far as, you know, what a dealer needs, first of all, that question, you can tell I wasn't answering it because my confidence often exceeds my abilities. So everyone who's comfortable selling electrics, that's rad. I would advise, though, to partner with the right brands that bring an enormous investment in education. You know, we talked about it with Tucker. You know, we do we take great strides to make sure that we have a massive library of existing content for education and programs. And it's because, you know, the person on the sales floor who's like your big enduro rider or, you know, whatever it is, your trials rider, you know, that person isn't going to be able to very effectively sell to your cruiser customer. And it's the exact same thing. If you don't know the language, if you don't know the experience, if you don't know that vocabulary and what to expect in any category of power sports, you're not going to be as successful as you could be, you know, and that's where partnering with the right brands, with the right education comes in. And I do have to take a step back and take one issue about the battery concerns is I would say, you know, battery lifespan of the battery is a bit of a boogeyman in the sense that, you know, if you take a step back and you look at like those early Prius, those early Prii, you know, they had that huge problem with batteries and people are getting hit with like $6,000 battery replacements and whatever. It was a very real concern. But, you know, like all fears, I keep things simple. I use a little acronym, false evidence appearing real. it's really not that case. You know, every single one of our batteries, I feel very confidently saying, is going to outlive the life of your motorcycle. You know, they all have, no questions asked, 5-year warranties. And like I said, we've been doing this for 15, 16 years. It's not like we have a line of 5-year and 1-day-old batteries, you know, lining out the back of our service department. Modern battery technology has come leaps and bounds from what was a very real concern at one point. So that also, I think, probably lends itself to that education element for dealers, is being prepared for those types of, objections, those types of concerns, and being able to dispel them properly.
Great. This is really good conversation. I love the little bit of back and forth here. That's good stuff. So dealers, another question for you guys. Do you consider the addition of e-power vehicles to be important for the future of your dealerships? Is this something that's part of your retail growth plan today? Please go ahead and answer the poll. And while you guys are doing that, the final question that I have, and I think this could become a little bit of a meaty one, so I want to make sure we've got time to talk about it, is where we see EV and power sports 5 years from now. So Bill, I'll let you start, but 5 years from today, are we still having conversations that are still at the basic level like this? Where do you see it going in 2027?
Well, without tipping our hand too much, 2022, we're going to launch 3 vehicles globally. And we're not stopping there. So I think EV, to put it in a nutshell without giving away too much, we will see a pretty big jump in the next 5 years from a lot of the OEMs, both, you know, in all categories. So yeah, it's an important growth factor for us and for our dealers to go into the next level of vehicles that they will be selling.
Mark, you were quoted as saying that it's not optional for growth for dealers. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think for all of you, and I'm sure most of you have an OEM brand of some shape or form in your dealerships. And I think it's fair to say that every single OEM brand on the planet right now is working on battery-powered products to augment their product line. So 5 years from now, I would fully expect all of you to have e-powered products. Why? I didn't say you weren't going to be. I am certainly going to be riding my ICE 20 years from now. I'm just saying that if you want to be selling product 5 years from now, your OEM manufacturers are going to be putting OEM e-powered vehicles in your dealerships. They're all investing in it. They're going to need their return on their investment. That's just the way it is. I mean,
Let me support that with one other factor. Whether we like it or not, there's going to be continued pressure to be carbon neutral from government agencies, whether we like it or not. You could see here in California, they're going to mandate, I think within 18 months, landscaping equipment has to be electric. How they're going to do that, I don't know, but that's happening here. So I think that's going to be a big factor too for all of us, that we're going to have to come along with E just because the government agencies are going to get us there.
And Bill, to second your point, the landscape in other continents is further ahead in that regard. And cities like Paris and the country of Vietnam have already announced that they're going to be ICE-free by 2030. So I think there is legislation that's going to drive some of this, although I hope not in this country, because I certainly want to keep my ICE products and keep running them. I believe at Tucker, the way we're approaching this, it's an and. We are going to continue to sell and service internal combustion products for as long as we possibly can, because we love them. But we're not naive to the fact that the e-power world is coming, and we want to make sure that we're leading and helping you lead in your dealerships, whether you believe in it or not. And if you don't, we're still going to be here to service you.
Yeah, by no means don't interpret that Kawasaki does not like ICE engines. We pride ourselves on going fast and performance. So we will still have ICE engines. So I don't want to be quoted that Bill Jenkins said Kawasaki's getting out of the internal combustion business. We are not.
And Dan should add his thoughts too.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I want to hear from Dan because I know you've got some thoughts on this.
There's a little to unpack there. No, I mean, where the industry is going to be in 5 years, like I'm in the right town if I could tell the future. Like I have no idea. There are a lot of, analyst indications that average out to anywhere between, 20 to 30% of all land-based transportation sales are going to be EVs. I don't know where that's going to be. What I can tell you is this. Oh, and first of all, I'd agree. To echo what you're saying, anybody who suggests that gas is going to disappear, I would say is sorely misinformed. I think that's ridiculous. But what I can tell you is we are seeing an unprecedented fluidity in market share, both from the brand and from the dealership standpoint. And there was a period in time, only once in history, when something like this happened. In the 1910s, when the commercialization and the common ownership, unless you were like Rockefellers or some crazy like railroad magnate, and you had a car, like when it became kind of commonplace and kind of ubiquitous. And what had to happen in that period is tons of stuff. You had to have service industries. You had to have an entire petrochemical industry developed. You had to have, roads built. It revolutionized. I mean, hell, the concrete shows here. That was one of the things that resulted in that is, industries for concrete and asphalt. All that happened. By the way, there was also a pandemic then and a world war. There was some other stuff going on, and yet it happened. We're in that point right now. And we have a little bit more capable manufacturing footprint as a species today than we did at the beginning of the 20th century. So during this unprecedented fluidity, there are going to be a series of winners and losers on this end of it that are going to be a different set of winners and losers on the other side of it. And I mean, to be perfectly honest, like I'm very confident that, being a few years early to the party, there's gonna be more than enough market share, certainly for our firm. But it's just, when do you want to participate? When do you want to get in? It's going to be exponentially more expensive to enter in with any meaningful impact after it's done versus before it's happened.
So do we risk losing any customers that are ICE customers just because we're adding EV to the portfolio?
Well, I certainly hope we're not losing any ICE customers. That if that's the takeaway, that is certainly not what I intended as a takeaway from this conversation. We, including Zero, agree that we're going to be living with ICE engines for a very long time. So we're not losing ICE customers. I would much rather have this conversation about how are we adding to those ICE customers' experiences by giving them other options to park alongside, or bringing in new customers to Powersports by giving them easier entry points into the industry when it's twist and go or less intimidating of an experience, and building a bigger, broader church rather than trying to eliminate anybody from it.
Yeah, I think to piggyback on that is that we may even see, which I hope we see, is the ICE, the electrification business bring some people in, and they may want to convert to an ICE vehicle because they want to go even have more bells and whistles or bigger CC or whatever the case may be. But as that entry level, that pathway into the power sports industry, we might bring them in, and they might go to an ICE vehicle. So I don't think we're going to lose ICE customers. I think we're going to grow the industry.
Great. Those are Dan.
Yeah, I just echo more of the same. We've touched on a few of these points with some of the other questions about, like, these are people, these are buyers. Mr. Good Buyer is going to be in your store looking for something different, and the Mr. Good Buyer who wants electric is going to need to find out where to go. Whether it's, and then also there are additional, parts and accessory sales that come with that. Obviously, not all of your parts catalog is going to be applicable to an ICE bike and an electric bike, but certainly a lot of the furniture is, a lot of the bags, a lot of the accessory bars, all that stuff. You know, if I had a dealership, I would like more people inside of it. I mean, that's about as simple as that.
I think that's a great place to end it. I want to thank you guys. Thank you, Bill, for dialing in. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Mark, for being here. I think this was a really good conversation. And thank you guys for, you know, interacting and engaging and telling us what you think. We have a couple minutes, and there's a microphone in the middle there. If anybody has a question that they'd like to ask, we've got a couple minutes for one or two, so please feel free to do that. Otherwise, thanks so much for joining us for this today.
Thanks for having us.
So my question is, a lot of the folks here aren't motorcycle dealers, but there may be accessory manufacturers or other things. It's not intuitive to me, and I'm not in that space. What are the accessory opportunities with e-bikes and e-vehicles that aren't present today or would need to be in some different direction than an ICE-powered vehicle?
Oh, I am very glad you asked. No, I mean, all kidding aside, obviously there are many elements of the motorcycle that you're familiar with that I've already described. On top of that, specific to an electric motorcycle, we offer a range of other physical add-ons, such as like additional battery cells, additional charging modules, that obviously, you know, a gas bike is never going to need to worry about. So that's pretty cool. But then on top of that, it's funny, I've been talking about this a bunch and I'm like, oh man, what's my spiel? But the reality is with motorcycles, there's obviously a huge appetite for customization. And just because you take away a lot of the, you know, exhaust and combustion components that are pretty common to do customization on, just because you take that away from the motorcycle doesn't mean that you get rid of that appetite to customize. So last November, we launched not just a first for us, but a first for the industry, a totally online, on-demand upgrade market. We call it the Cypher Store because our operating system is called Cypher. But there you can, just like you would update apps on your phone, at the push of a button, you can add torque, you can add power, you can add increased battery capacity, you can increase your charging speed. You can even add, you know, usability functions that are otherwise unavailable, including like on-dash, turn-by-turn navigation, a slow-speed park and reverse mode. You know, if you're trying to get into a nasty spot, like I live in San Francisco, and I literally live on a 22% grade hill. So, you know, having that ability is actually really handy. The cool thing is, you know, it's all like one-time option, you know, just touch of a button, and it's pretty expansive as far as like the types of improvements you can offer your bike, but it's the tip of the iceberg. And the rad thing is, like, if you look at automotive, because again, there are a lot of parallels between where automotive goes and where we go as Powersports. You have the VW Group just introduced something similar. You have Rivian, and you have Tesla, and those are the, or I'm sorry, and you have Lucid. And those are the only three companies that have something similar to what we're just launching. And two of them aren't even on the road yet. So, you know, it really just opens a bit of a crack in the window of what's possible. So, you know, to answer your question, there are parts and accessories that exist that are unique to electric motorcycles. But the cool thing is, I have no idea like how expansive that array of parts and accessories business can eventually be. I mean, it's a whole brave new world. It's all zeros and ones.
Mark, what do you think?
And not that I would ever encourage anyone to break rules, but you also have, because of licensing requirements, particularly in the stand-up area, the stand-up scooter space or the e-bike space, there are speed limiters and other things like that that are put in place for good reason, for the safety of the customer and obviously for the safety of everyone around them. So I would certainly not encourage tampering with that. But maybe in a race application, you could see a customer maybe wanting to change that. And those kinds of things, which are all parallels to our ICE world. We all know people who modify their vehicles for race application only. Those things might exist also.
But, oh, great. Bill, I want you to weigh in quick, and then we've got another question, but any additional thoughts
My
on that?
thoughts are similar, safety equipment and then individualization of the vehicle leads to a great opportunity to accessorize.
Thanks. Go ahead and ask your question.
All right. It strikes me that a swappable battery solves a lot of the challenge with refueling. What do you guys see as the likelihood of the industry being able to align in a way that makes that realistic?
Great question. Marc, I'll start with you.
Other places in the world, they have gone to some standardization of batteries, particularly for more utilitarian applications like around the city step-through scooters and so forth. So I think you're spot on. There is an opportunity for that application in urban areas particularly, because you end up with what looks like a vending machine for batteries where you're able to swap a battery in and out, and then your battery becomes a subscription service to the vehicle that you purchase. That opportunity exists, and there are 2 major manufacturers in that space today. So yes, on the large batteries, I think you're better off asking the OEMs, but I think the IP might be a bigger issue there.
Well, I think IP is one element, but then also you have the physical, like the artifact itself. And the reality is with batteries, that's the highest density component to the motorcycle. So like, for example, we have, and we do still globally into agencies, but we've discontinued for domestic sale here. We've had in our line modular batteries that are 3.6 kilowatt hours. I'm not going to get into all that, but that's basically, you know, your gas tank. The reason we had it so small relative to our maximum battery capacity on our larger bikes is because they're crazy heavy. Like they're really popular. We designed them in a lot of ways for, you know, like race applications. You know, think about doing like hot laps and swapping them out and all that jazz. They were really popular in urban areas, similar to like, and I'm fine saying it, like Gogoro and a couple of the modular battery assemblages that Marc mentioned. It was the same thing. Like, you know, you live in a high rise or you live in a walk up or whatever. You don't have a garage. You don't have access. You're not going to daisy chain an extension cord out of your 4th floor window. It was something that was small enough that you could carry, but big enough that it provided some meaningful range for you in an urban environment. You know, that's definitely an opportunity. We haven't found it to be as popular in our product line, but that's not to say that there's not going to be some, you know, back to seeing the future, what the future of the industry looks like. I don't know if there's going to be some crazy light solid state battery or something. Like, people way smarter than me are working on that. But I can say for right now, it's really just such a cumbersome part of the battery, or I mean of the motorcycle. It doesn't lend itself to being super modular.
Bill, anything you'd like to add to this part of the conversation?
I agree with the concept is terrific. I think with the larger size vehicles, it's a challenge because of not only size, weight, but price. I do think you'll see that. I mean, I do it myself here. I've got an electric blower, and I've got 2 batteries for it. If the battery dies, I've got another one on charge, pop it in, and I'm still can complete the job around the house. So I think the application depends on cost of the replacement battery or the additional battery, size of the battery, and ease of application in and out of the unit.
Any other questions from the group while we've got a couple minutes? Looks like we've got maybe one more question coming up here.
You know, I'm sorry, just because we just had an exchange here. Oh, real quick, but about modularity, you'll see a lot of it already happening really quite successfully in the pedal assist, like mountain bike and, you know, gravel bike space, because those batteries are small enough that they can fit in like a bottle cage. So it is happening, and I just hadn't considered that because we don't make bicycles.
We do.
Go ahead.
Is Bill still on?
Yeah.
So I'm his #1 dealer in the state of Alaska. For Kawasaki, I'm #2 in Yamaha. And we're waiting for this electric stuff. And I heard he was supposed to introduce 3 models here. Bill?
Oh, no. I'm not, I'm backing up what our president announced at EICMA, which is the launch in 2022 of three motorcycles, electric motorcycles globally. We're not ready to announce them today. Very soon, though. Be patient.
That's the only reason I came here, Bill.
Well, we're glad you came.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, yep, go ahead.
It sounds like there's going to be a lot of batteries out there on the road in the next couple of years. Are these batteries going to be recyclable, or is there a plan? What happens to these batteries once they're spent?
Ooh, I got an answer for that,
Go for it.
because I know you don't.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, we haven't met one that you don't have an answer for, so we're going for it. No, so yes is the answer. They are recyclable. There are a couple of different companies in the United States that are doing recycling for batteries at scale, and we're working to create a reverse logistics chain. We're not quite there yet, but we are working at Tucker to create a reverse logistics chain for the dealers so that we can be your provider for that and make it go away for you, because we believe that's an important part of the ecosystem as well.
And yeah, our battery chemistry is totally proprietary. It is the leading power density in all of transportation. You're not going to find higher power density in any of all automotive or in power sports, and it's leading energy density. But on top of that, it was a mandate that we designed it to be fully recyclable. And we have, obviously regulations are different here. Their facilities are different here, but I know that a lot of our European markets, they have entire market-wide or country-wide recycling programs that we are bound to participate in, which is good because it was one of the design elements and minimum viable product elements that we introduced to our batteries. So yeah, great question.
These are great questions. You guys are bringing some real thought here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious, Dan, talking about your, was it Cypher 3.0, where you can change torque, change whatever upgrades you can make to it. How do you think that affects the trade cycle on somebody that wants to buy a Zero, as far as, would you think their only opportunity to change bikes would be if they wanted to change to a different style of bike? Because there's some people that just don't. Just curious your thoughts on that.
Fantastic question. I did not plant him in the audience, but that's awesome because so one of the things that we had to consider when we were designing Cypher 3 Plus, but whatever, the Cypher store is, does that upgrade follow the owner? Does that upgrade follow the bike? There were a lot of questions about that because if you recall from a few years ago, Tesla got in a big legal wrangle because they were like, yeah, no, you bought extra upgrades. We're taking it back if you ever sell it in the secondary market. That's BS. It's just like buying an exhaust system or something. If you buy it and you put it on the motorcycle, why is that value not inherently going to travel on into the secondary market? So all of the upgrades are going to follow the VIN. They're going to be on the motorcycle. There are methods for the dealers to verify, it's there. And if you're a prospective buyer of a secondary market bike, there are ways that you can prove or disprove that those are there. And what was the other part of the question?
I was just curious if you think that people are going to, I don't know, maybe build their perfect Zero, and then that ruins or changes what the trade cycle would be if you're only hoping on basically the customer outliving the lifespan of the bike versus, you get people all the time, beginning riders come in and they trade in 6 months, a year down the road. I'm just curious if you think that affects it at all.
Well, I mean, obviously, I think every Zero is the perfect Zero. No, I think that's a really good question, and I think our new 22 SR is emblematic of what you're describing because, we talk about it being the most customizable, the most effortlessly adaptable motorcycle, in history. Because the idea is to provide some of our pinnacle, some of our premium technology hardware, that has been very popular with our partnership with Polaris. I mean, the fact is, it's premium for a reason, We wanted to make a way for people to have access to it for a discount, and then they can build and pick and choose which performance elements of that bike that they wanted. And those can be built upon, multiple times. I'm not going to divulge our entire product roadmap, but the reality is, you want to be able to have a motorcycle grow with you, whether that's a riding ability or whether that's just a taste or proclivity standpoint. Whatever it is, we want you as an owner to have that power to change it as you change. Or just buy, new bikes every year. I'll let you do that too.
I was actually going to say, there's always going to be some people who just want the new thing, right? I don't think that ever totally goes away. Yeah, same.
Great question though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi there. So I think we kind of failed with the internal combustion motorcycles to have some unified, standardized, whatever, CAN or keyline, data flowing in. And with the e-bikes and e-motorcycles, seems like, if we would be treating them as like IT stuff, they should be having some APIs or anything, to maybe enable some platforms to appear to be like, there are many startups doing the e-motorcycles, right? And it would make sense for retailer have maybe one-stop, platform or something as that. Does it make sense to come with some standardized things here?
So if I understand the question correctly, it's, why aren't there similar to APIs, opportunities for people to like jailbreak their motorcycles and do some stuff in there, and maybe with third parties. And what I can tell you, if it's more or less what you're getting at, is, the reality is our secret sauce is in our cipher. So when I talk about an operating system, think about the components that go into an electric motorcycle. You got a battery, a motor, a motor controller. For us, we have the full complement of Bosch ABS and traction and stability controls and all that stuff. And you need, a central nervous system. You need an operating system to act as the brain to handle all of those subsystems. And building a brain that is sophisticated and that provides a transformational riding experience, which is, central to every product we develop, you have to have a really mature brain, and as a parent of a 7-month-old, I can assure you, an immature brain, though it may be fun, it is unpredictable. It does crazy stuff when you least expect it. Maybe it feels a tantrum coming on. Maybe it's going to spit up. So that is definitely our core differentiator. And to be completely clear, we have a strategic partnership with Polaris in developing 3 of their, most important product categories, co-developing it. And the one thing that I can tell you I always hear is some of their engineers will ask some of our engineers for source code, and that's the one thing that we can't share, because therein lies our real differentiator, our ability to, make evocative and crazy enjoyable machines. So in order for us to do like an API kind of format, that would have to make it open source software. And that's one thing that I can assure you we're, at least today, comfortable saying we're not going to do. Who knows what the future holds, though.
Mark, you look like you've got some thoughts.
Yeah. So, when we think about the accessorization in Powersports and what we are used to, whether it comes to fuel packs, reflashing power curves, or even, other add-ons and accessorizations, I actually agree with Bruno. I think there should be some level of input that we can bring from a third-party standpoint so that we can standardize how electric vehicles are able to be talked to. It could be very easily ring-fenced inside whatever your core source code is, so that you're only allowing a certain number of mods or add-ons or bolt-ons or whatever. But where Bruno's coming from the world of electronics, consumer electronics for power sports, the integration into the vehicle is a big and important step. And I would encourage all OEMs to build some kind of a trapdoor to allow manufacturers of accessories to enhance the experience. Because, we know the reality of an OEM environment. They will invest in what makes sense from a monetary standpoint for the company. and then they will stop investing. And there are lots of add-ons that can be monetized, and we all have been in this business long enough to have seen a lot of them, that whether they're not legal or whether they're only legal under certain circumstances or whether they're adding functionality for a small subset of users, they are an upside for most of us in the industry, and having the access to be able to add them on to a unit is, I think, a big upside for the industry. So I would encourage OEMs to create some way to communicate in a standardized format so that we and the rest of the industry can talk to your units. And you know, it's not dissimilar to what happens in the OEM automotive market as well.
That's a great point, like diagnostic portals and whatnot. You know, mea culpa, like that's an excellent point, because we've already seen the benefit and the challenge of not uniform like standardization, and specifically in charging infrastructure. You know, I mentioned the J1772 plug, whatever. Yeah, like how many times do you want to buy a new charger for your cell phone? That's a major pain in the ass. But like, you know, there was a point when it was kind of the Wild West, and there were like Chatamo and, you know, Meinekes and all sorts of different, you know, charging plugs. And until that became uniform, it really was a little bit hectic. I mean, you know, the only time I've ridden around in the UK, they still have that, where there's like 7 different charging methods, and it's a real pain to navigate. So you're totally right. There are some things where standardization and uniformity are going to be important. Right now, I don't see enough I mean, there's competitive entry all the time into our space, and you know, there will come a point when it probably has to happen.
Bill, do you want to weigh in at all? Do you have any extra thoughts on that one?
I think conceptually it has its bonuses for the industry. I think it's challenging to get OEMs to agree to share certain technologies or to take a service customer away because everybody can get the test equipment or whatever. And I'm not saying that's wrong or right, but I just think it is a challenge to do that. But I do understand conceptually why it would be a good thing for the industry.
Anybody have any other questions? Thanks so much for the conversation, the engagement, you guys.
How about a big electrified round of applause for our panel? Thank you, everyone. And don't miss the AIMExpo opening session tonight, 4:30, right here on the education stage. And then at 5 o'clock, the big industry party powered by Tucker right here. See you then.
Thank you.